Admiral Veltharian's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display floating before his command throne. 300 vessels of the hegemony's finest battle fleet hung in perfect formation around the disputed mining world of Zarion 7, their hulls gleaming with the dull sheen of battle-worn armor plating. Each ship represented decades of engineering mastery from the greatest military minds across 17 star systems. "Sir," Communications Officer Rixtal's voice carried an undertone of confusion that made Veltharian's neck spines twitch. "The human vessel is responding." "Responding?" Veltharian's mandibles clicked irritably. "We delivered an ultimatum. They have precisely 17 standard minutes to withdraw from hegemony space or face annihilation. What could they possibly have to say?" The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a single, almost comically small vessel drifting between the massive hegemony fleet and the planet below. The human ship looked like a metal splinter compared to the kilometer-long dreadnoughts surrounding it, barely 200 meters from bow to stern, with an angular design that seemed more functional than intimidating. "Patch them through," Veltharian commanded, settling back into his command throne. This would be amusing at least. Perhaps the humans would beg for mercy or attempt some primitive diplomatic maneuver. Either way, it would provide entertainment for his crew before the inevitable destruction. The view screen shifted, and a human face appeared. Veltharian had encountered humans before, during the initial contact protocols and various trade negotiations. They were soft-looking creatures with their pale skin and small binocular eyes. This one appeared to be a female, with short-cropped dark hair and wearing what looked like a simple military uniform. "I am Captain Kane Volaris of the Terran vessel Defiant," the human said, her voice steady and unremarkable. "You've given us an ultimatum to withdraw from this system." "Indeed," Veltharian replied, his translator converting his words into the crude human language. "You have 14 minutes remaining. I suggest you use them wisely." The human tilted her head slightly, and something flickered across her features. Not fear, but something else. Something that made Veltharian's combat instincts stir uneasily. "Admiral," she said, "with respect, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This system was claimed by Terra 6 months ago under the Frontier Expansion Act. We filed the proper documentation with the Galactic Council." "Paperwork," Veltharian scoffed. "The hegemony recognizes no such claim. This system falls within our sphere of influence, as determined by right of conquest." "Right of conquest?" Captain Volaris leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, are you familiar with human history?" The question caught Veltharian off guard. "What relevance does your species' primitive past have to this situation?" "Quite a bit, actually." The human's expression remained calm, but there was something in her eyes now, a glint that reminded Veltharian of the predators from his homeworld's deep forests. "You see, humans have a saying, 'Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.' And our history is filled with examples of what happens when someone threatens our people." Veltharian's tactical officer, Sub-Commander Kextal, leaned toward him. "Sir, our scans indicate their ship is armed, but with primitive kinetic weapons and basic energy projectors. Nothing that could threaten even our lightest escorts." 13 minutes, human, Veltharian announced. "Use them to flee, or face the consequences." But Captain Volaris didn't look afraid. Instead, she smiled, a predatory expression that sent an inexplicable chill down Veltharian's spine. "Admiral," she said quietly, "that's just one ship you're looking at, and you're absolutely right. The Defiant couldn't scratch your fleet." She paused, her smile widening slightly. "But I'm curious about something. You've got 300 ships here, facing one small human vessel, so I have to ask—" Her words hung in the air like the calm before a storm. "Why are you backing off?" The bridge of the hegemony's wrath fell silent. Veltharian's communication officers exchanged glances, their mandibles clicking in confusion. The Admiral himself felt his neck spines flatten against his skull, an involuntary response to the human's inexplicable confidence. Backing off? Veltharian's voice carried a dangerous edge. Human, you pilot a single vessel against the might of the hegemony. We are not backing off. We are showing restraint. Captain Valeris leaned back in her chair, her expression maddeningly serene. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're maintaining a very careful distance. Your formation is beautiful, Admiral, textbook perfect. But you're hanging back at exactly 40,000 kilometers. Why not closer? Sub-Commander Kextal whispered urgently. Sir, standard engagement doctrine calls for— I know what doctrine calls for, Veltharian snapped, then forced his voice to remain level. We maintain optimal firing positions. Your point is irrelevant. Is it? The human touched something on her console, and her image shifted. Behind her, Veltharian could see the bridge of her vessel, cramped, efficient, with crew members working at stations with practiced calm. You see, Admiral, we've been monitoring your fleet for the past 3 hours. Your formation hasn't moved, not even standard patrol adjustments. We maintain position to keep exactly 40,000 kilometers between us, Valeris interrupted. The same distance your intelligence services recommended after the Proxima incident. Veltharian's blood ran cold. The Proxima incident was classified at the highest levels of hegemony intelligence. How could this human know about it? I see that got your attention, Valeris continued. Yes, we know about Proxima. We know about the hegemony patrol that encountered a human mining vessel 18 months ago. 3 light cruisers against 1 converted freighter. What happened to those cruisers, Admiral? The bridge crew was listening now, their attention focused entirely on the human's words. Veltharian's mandibles clicked involuntarily, a sign of extreme agitation that his crew would recognize. The official report states they were destroyed by a spatial anomaly, he said carefully. The official report? Valeris nodded. Very diplomatic. But you know what really happened, don't you? Your intelligence files have the truth. That mining vessel was carrying a prototype human weapon system, something we'd been working on for quite some time. Veltharian's tactical officer was frantically working at his console, pulling up classified files. His face went pale as he read. Sir, Kextal whispered, the human ship. It's not showing any weapons signatures beyond basic defensive systems. That's because you're not looking for the right thing, Valeris said, apparently having overheard. Your sensors are calibrated for conventional weapons, plasma cannons, missile systems, kinetic projectiles. You're not scanning for what we actually brought. And what did you bring? Veltharian asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Valeris smiled again, and this time there was no humor in it at all. Admiral, what do you know about human physics research? The question seemed to come from nowhere, but Veltharian's intelligence briefings had covered human scientific capabilities. Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel, quantum computing, and basic antimatter manipulation. Standard for a Type 1 civilization. Standard, Valeris agreed, but humans have always been good at thinking outside the box. Tell me, what happens when you detonate a small antimatter charge inside a quantum singularity? Veltharian's blood turned to ice. That's theoretical physics. Impossible to achieve. Is it? Valeris leaned forward. Because right now, Admiral, there's a microscopic artificial singularity sitting in the center of this system. We've been feeding it antimatter for the past 3 hours, while your fleet has been maintaining its optimal firing position. The tactical officer's console began screaming warnings. Sir, massive gravitational distortion detected. It's growing. The beauty of weaponizing quantum physics, Valeris continued conversationally, is that once you start the process, it becomes self-sustaining. The singularity draws in matter and energy, growing stronger with each passing moment. In approximately 10 minutes, it will reach critical mass. You're bluffing, Veltharion snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Your sensors can detect the gravitational waves. Your scientists can calculate the expansion rate. You know I'm telling the truth. Valaris stood up, and for the first time, Veltharion saw something truly terrifying in her expression. The question is, Admiral, what are you going to do about it? Alarms blared across the bridge of the Hegemony's wrath as tactical displays lit up with warnings. The artificial singularity was indeed growing, its gravitational field beginning to affect the outer edges of the Hegemony formation. Sir, Kextal's voice cracked with panic. The singularity is pulling in cosmic debris. At this rate of expansion, it will destabilize the entire system. Veltharion's mind raced. The human had just confessed to deploying a weapon of mass destruction that could kill millions of civilians on Zerion 7, not to mention his entire fleet. Either she was insane or... You're going to destroy yourself along with us, he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. No sane being would deploy such a weapon. Captain Valaris shrugged. That's where you're wrong, Admiral. Humans aren't always sane. We're passionate, reckless, and we have a tendency to bite back when cornered. Your intelligence files should have mentioned that. The planetary population will be evacuated, Valaris interrupted. There are human evacuation ships en route. They'll arrive in, about 9 minutes. Just enough time to get everyone to safety before things get interesting. Veltharion's communication officer suddenly straightened. Sir, multiple FTL signatures detected. Incoming vessels. The main display shifted to show the system's edge, where dozens of human ships were dropping out of hyperspace. But these weren't warships. They were massive transport vessels, their hulls marked with emergency evacuation symbols. Impossible, Veltharion breathed. You couldn't have coordinated this. We've been monitoring all human communication channels. Have you? Valaris smiled. Admiral, what's the first rule of military strategy? Never reveal your full capabilities to the enemy, Veltharion answered automatically. Exactly. Did you really think one small ship would venture into Hegemony space without backup? Without a plan? Valaris gestured to her bridge crew. We've been broadcasting on quantum-encrypted channels for the past 6 hours. Your communication interceptors can't even detect those frequencies, much less decode them. The evacuation ships were moving with practiced efficiency, their powerful tractor beams beginning to lift entire population centers from Zerion 7's surface. The operation was too smooth, too coordinated to be improvised. This was planned, Veltharion said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. All of it. From the moment your fleet entered this system, Valaris confirmed, we knew you'd come eventually. The Hegemony always does. You see a valuable resource, you take it. But humans have learned to plan for bullies. Sub-Commander Kextal leaned close to Veltharion's command throne. Sir, we need to withdraw. The gravitational distortions are beginning to affect our navigation systems. Withdraw? Veltharion's voice rose. We outnumber them 300 to 1. We cannot show weakness. Can't you? Valaris interjected. Admiral, let me ask you something. When a small animal backs a much larger predator into a corner, what happens? The predator kills the smaller animal, Veltharion replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Sometimes, Valaris agreed, but sometimes the small animal is venomous, sometimes it has friends, and sometimes, Admiral, the small animal has nothing left to lose. As if to emphasize her point, the Defiant suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the growing singularity. What are you doing? Veltharion demanded. Humans have another saying, Valaris called over the increasing gravitational stress alarms. If you're going to go down, take as many of them with you as possible. The human ship was diving toward the singularity, its engines flaring with desperate intensity. But instead of being torn apart by the immense gravitational forces, the Defiant seemed to be riding them, using the singularity's pull to accelerate beyond anything the hegemony sensors had thought possible. "She's going to destabilize the singularity," Kextal shouted. "If she impacts it at that velocity, the resulting explosion will take out everything within a light year," Veltharion finished, his voice hollow with realization. On the view screen, Captain Valeris was still smiling, but now there was something wild in her expression, something that spoke of calculated madness and absolute determination. "Last chance, Admiral," she called over the communication link. "Order your fleet to withdraw, or we all die together. Your choice." Veltharion stared at the tactical display, watching as his massive fleet, the pride of the hegemony, hung helplessly, in space, while a single human vessel prepared to commit the ultimate act of defiance. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Veltharion truly understood what it meant to be afraid. The bridge of the hegemony's wrath had fallen into a tense silence broken only by the steady ping of proximity alarms and the low hum of overtaxed systems. Veltharion's 300 ships maintained their formation, but he could feel the uncertainty radiating from his crew. This wasn't how wars were supposed to unfold. "Sir," Navigation Officer Kylthar reported, his voice tight with strain, "the Singularity's gravitational field is beginning to interfere with our FTL drives. If we don't withdraw soon, we may not be able to jump to safety." Veltharion's eyes remained fixed on the tactical display, watching the human vessel's suicidal dive toward the growing black hole. The Defiant was still accelerating, its trajectory impossible to predict as it rode the chaotic gravitational currents. "Admiral," Captain Valeris's voice crackled through the communication system, distorted by the intense gravitational waves. "You have about 4 minutes before the point of no return. After that, even if you order a withdrawal, physics won't let you escape." "This is madness," Veltharion snarled. "You would sacrifice your own life to deny us this system?" "If necessary," Valeris replied without hesitation. "But I'm hoping it won't come to that. You see, Admiral, humans have a concept we call mutually assured destruction. The idea that sometimes the best way to prevent a war is to make victory impossible for everyone." Subcommander Kextal was frantically working at his console. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations from the human evacuation ships. They're not just evacuating civilians, they're positioning themselves around the system's edge." "Doing what?" Veltharion demanded. "They appear to be forming a perimeter," Kextal said uncertainly, "as if they're preparing to contain something." On the view screen, Captain Valeris nodded approvingly. "My people learn fast, Admiral. We've had to. When you're outnumbered and outgunned, you have to be smarter than your enemies." "What are you planning?" Veltharion asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. "Simple," Valeris replied. "If you won't withdraw peacefully, we'll make sure the hegemony learns what happens when you corner a human. The evacuation ships are equipped with quantum beacons. When the singularity reaches critical mass, they'll broadcast the entire encounter to every human colony in the galaxy." Veltharion felt his blood run cold. "You're recording this?" "Every word, every action, every tactical decision," Valeris confirmed. "When human command sees how the hegemony treats peaceful mining operations, they'll respond accordingly. And, Admiral, you really don't want to see how humans respond to the murder of civilians." The implications hit Veltharion like a physical blow. If the hegemony was seen as the aggressor in this encounter, if they were viewed as destroyers of worlds, it would unite every human colony against them. The hegemony might win this battle, but they would lose the war. "Sir," Communication Officer Rixtal reported urgently, "I'm receiving transmission from Hegemony Command. They're ordering us to stand down and withdraw immediately." "What?" Veltharion spun toward his communication station. "On whose authority?" "High Command, sir. They've been monitoring the situation through our quantum relays. They're saying—" Rixtal hesitated. They're saying this engagement is not worth the risk of total war with humanity. Veltharian's mandibles clicked in frustration. Command was probably right, but the military leader in him rebelled against the idea of backing down from a single ship. "Admiral," Captain Valeris called out, her voice growing fainter as the Defiant continued its descent toward the singularity, "I'm approaching the point where I won't be able to alter my trajectory. You have 2 minutes to make your decision." "And if I order my fleet to withdraw?" Veltharian asked. "Then I'll abort my dive and stabilize the singularity," Valeris replied. "We'll both live to fight another day, but this system stays under human protection." "One system," Veltharian muttered. "This is all about one mining world." "No, Admiral," Valeris corrected him, her voice suddenly serious. "This is about the principle. This is about proving that might doesn't always make right. This is about showing the galaxy that humans won't be bullied, no matter how big the bully." The tactical display showed the Defiant continuing its impossible trajectory, seeming to dance on the edge of destruction, and despite himself, Veltharian found himself impressed by the human captain's skill and determination. 90 seconds, Valeris announced. Around him, Veltharian could see his bridge crew watching him, waiting for his decision. 300 ships, thousands of lives, the pride of the hegemony, all hanging in the balance because of one human's refusal to back. "Down, sir," Kextal prompted quietly. Veltharian closed his eyes, the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. When he opened them again, his decision was made. "All ships," Veltharian's voice rang out across the fleet communication. "Channels, begin immediate withdrawal to safe distance. Set course for the system's edge." The bridge crew stared at him in shock. Sub-Commander Kextal was the first to find his voice. "Sir, are you certain? We have overwhelming superiority." "Overwhelming superiority means nothing if we're all dead," Veltharian cut him off. "And High Command has made their position clear. We withdraw." On the view screen, Captain Valeris nodded with what looked like genuine respect. "Thank you, Admiral. I know that wasn't an easy decision." "Don't thank me yet, human," Veltharian replied grimly. "This encounter is far from over." As the hegemony fleet began its withdrawal, their massive ships executing perfect formation maneuvers despite the gravitational interference, Veltharian watched the Defiant begin its own impossible maneuver, somehow pulling out of its death spiral and beginning to stabilize the artificial singularity. "How is she doing that?" Kextal whispered in amazement. "Human engineering," Veltharian said, his voice carrying a note of grudging admiration. "They may be primitive in some ways, but they have a gift for improvisation." Minutes passed as both fleets maintained their positions, the hegemony ships at a safe distance, the human evacuation vessels continuing their systematic removal of civilians from Zerion 7. The singularity slowly began to shrink as the Defiant somehow managed to reverse its growth. "Admiral," Rixtal reported, "we're receiving another transmission from the human captain." "Put her through." Captain Valeris appeared on the view screen again, but this time she looked exhausted. Her uniform was stained with sweat, and there was a cut above her left eye. "Admiral," she said, her voice hoarse but determined, "I want to make something clear. What happened here today wasn't about conquest or expansion. It wasn't about showing off human military capabilities. It was about protecting innocent people." "Innocent. People who were mining in disputed territory," Veltharian pointed out. "Disputed by whom?" Valeris countered. "The Galactic Council recognized our claim. We filed the proper paperwork, paid the required fees, and established a legal mining operation. The only dispute came from the hegemony's decision to ignore interstellar law." Veltharian's mandibles clicked in irritation, but he couldn't deny the truth of her words. The hegemony had indeed ignored the proper legal channels, assuming that their military might would be sufficient to settle the matter. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Valeris said, "we both go home. The human population will be evacuated, as planned, not because we're abandoning our claim, but because we're not going to use civilians as shields. This system will be designated a protected zone, while the Galactic Council reviews the territorial dispute. And if the Council rules against humanity? Valeris smiled, but there was steel in her expression. Then we'll abide by their decision. But, Admiral, I should warn you, humans have excellent lawyers. Our legal team has been preparing for this dispute for months. Despite himself, Veltharion felt a flicker of amusement. The humans were turning out to be far more complex than he had anticipated. Captain, he said finally, I have a question for you. Why did you really do this? Why risk everything for one mining world? Valeris was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. Because, Admiral, sometimes someone has to stand up to bullies. Not because they're sure they'll win, but because it's the right thing to do. Humans have a long history of fighting against impossible odds when our principles are at stake, even when it means certain death. Especially then, Valeris replied. That's what makes us human. As the communication ended, Veltharion sat back in his command throne, his mind turning over the events of the day. His fleet had been forced to withdraw by a single human vessel, not through superior firepower, but through superior will and determination. Sir, Kextal said quietly, what do we report to High Command? Veltharion considered the question carefully. We report the truth, that we encountered a human vessel defending a legally established mining operation, that the humans demonstrated capabilities we were not prepared for, and that we withdrew rather than risk an interstellar incident. And the singularity weapon was a desperate gambit by a cornered opponent, Veltharion said, one that should serve as a warning to the hegemony about underestimating human ingenuity. As his fleet began its journey back to hegemony space, Veltharion found himself thinking about Captain Valeris and her crew. They had faced impossible odds and found a way to win, not through violence, but through courage and determination. Perhaps he thought there was more to learn from humans than the hegemony had realized. 6 months later, Admiral Veltharion stood in the conference room of the Hegemony High Command, facing a panel of his superiors. The holographic displays around him showed detailed analyses of the Zerion 7 incident, tactical breakdowns, and intelligence reports on human capabilities. Admiral, High Chancellor Mordesh began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Your report on the human encounter has been illuminating. Tell us, in your professional opinion, what threat do humans pose to the hegemony? Veltharion had been dreading this question for months. The official report had been carefully worded, but he knew his superiors wanted the truth. Significant, he said simply. Not because of their numbers or their technology, but because of their mindset. Humans don't think like we do. They don't calculate odds the way other species do. When cornered, they become unpredictable and dangerous. Surely you're not suggesting that we fear a species that has barely achieved interstellar travel? Chancellor Mordesh scoffed. I'm suggesting, Chancellor, that we respect them, Veltharion replied carefully. The Zerion 7 incident demonstrated that humans are willing to die for their principles. They turned a potential military defeat into a strategic victory through sheer determination. And what of their weapon capabilities? Asked Intelligence Director Zental. The artificial singularity device. Do we have any defense against such weapons? We're working on it, Veltharion said. But honestly, I don't think the weapon itself is the real threat. It's their willingness to use it. How do you fight an enemy who would rather die than surrender? The room fell silent as the hegemony leadership contemplated this. They had built their empire on the principle that superior force would always prevail. The idea of an enemy who could negate that advantage through sheer stubbornness was disturbing. What do you recommend, Admiral? Chancellor Mordesh asked finally. Negotiation, Veltharion said without hesitation. The humans have proven they're not interested in conquest. They just want to be left alone to develop their colonies. We should work with them, not against them. Work with them? Intelligence Director Zental's voice carried a note of disbelief. The hegemony does not negotiate with inferior species. With respect, Director, Veltharion replied. The humans have proven they're not inferior. Different, yes. Smaller in numbers, yes, but not inferior. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Captain Cain Valaris stood on the bridge of the Defiant, now serving as the flagship of the newly established Terran Defense Force. The ship had been upgraded with the latest human technology, but its core mission remained the same: to stand guard against those who would threaten human colonies. Captain, her communications officer reported, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Put it through. The view screen lit up with the image of Admiral Marcus Thorne, the head of Terran Defense. Captain Valaris, I have news from the Galactic Council. They've officially recognized human territorial claims in the Xerion system and 5 other disputed regions. The legal team sends their congratulations. Valaris smiled. Excellent news, Admiral. Any word on hegemony response? Surprisingly positive, Thorne replied. They've agreed to establish a joint commission to resolve future territorial disputes through legal channels rather than military force. It seems your little demonstration at Xerion 7 made quite an impression. That was the idea, sir. Indeed. You've been assigned to head up the new Frontier Defense Initiative. Your mission is to establish human presence in the outer colonies and ensure that no one mistakes our peaceful intentions for weakness. As the transmission ended, Valaris looked out at the stars beyond her view screen. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species and civilizations. Some would be friends, others would be enemies, but all would learn the same lesson that the hegemony had learned at Xerion 7. Humanity might be small, might be young, might be outnumbered, but they were not to be underestimated. When pushed, humans would push back. When threatened, they would stand their ground. And when cornered, they would fight with the fury of a species that had clawed its way up from the primordial ooze to touch the stars. In the depths of space, both human and alien ships continued their patrols, maintaining an uneasy peace. The Xerion 7 incident had changed everything, not through violence or conquest, but through the simple demonstration that sometimes the smallest voice can speak the loudest when it refuses to be silenced. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. That day, when facing humanity, it's not the size of the ship that matters. It's the size of the heart of those who crew it. And human hearts, it turned out, were far larger than anyone had imagined.